Opinions. We all have them, otherwise how could you claim to be an anime fan? If you're not heavily opinionated about 90% of the things that happen in the anime and manga world every single day, then really, are you an actual fan? You are. You absolutely are. But the majority of fans online would probably tell you otherwise. But from this culture of everybody needing to have an opinion about basically everything was born the idea of hot takes, specifically as they pertain to anime. And thus, not only do the majority of anime fans have opinions about the things they either love or hate, but they also got a fair amount of anime hot takes. But since I'm always here in this chair, spewing my anime hot takes to the world, because that's literally my job, and you guys have the pleasure, I guess we'll call it, of listening to them, I figured today I would sit down and listen to your anime hot takes. So even though a fair amount of my videos are kind of dumb or salacious or have clickbaity titles, I still maintain a 98% like status on almost every single video I've ever posted on YouTube, which is because of all of you, because you're all super nice and super sweet, and I love you. Thank you. Mwah. But regardless of how salacious or theoretical the video I'm making is, there's usually gonna be some version of an anime hot take somewhere in that video. Therefore you, my subscribers, have been treated to an endless wave of anime hot takes from this face. But today you're sitting in this seat, because today I want to go through your anime hot takes and rank them based on whether or not it is actually a hot take and whether or not I agree with it if it is. But what do I mean by that? Well, just because I agree with something doesn't necessarily mean that it's a hot take. And just because I disagree with something doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad take. If you were to say something like Konosuba is perverted and it makes me uncomfortable, I would say that's not a hot take. That's objectively the truth, and while I disagree with you, it doesn't make me uncomfortable. The fact that it makes you uncomfortable isn't crazy. It's a lot sometimes. So not only is that hot take not a hot take because it's the objective truth, and I don't think anybody would disagree with it, but also if it was a hot take, I wouldn't necessarily buy into it because the perversion doesn't make me uncomfortable. But where am I sourcing these hot takes from? Am I hitting the internet? Am I calling you guys personally? No. Yesterday I posted on my community tab on the Weeb Commander channel you're currently watching this video on, and I asked you guys for your anime hot takes. And I got 793 comments, which is a lot. Now this obviously means I'm not gonna get to the majority of these hot takes. So I'm simply gonna start at what is the top of my comments and work my way down. But if you left a comment in that community tab that I don't get along to, tell me in the comments below and ask me to make a part 2 to this video. And if this video does well, then we'll do exactly that. It's also important to note before we head into this video that we're gonna be making a tier list, not ranking things. So I'll break down what the hot take is, what I believe the ideology behind it is, and then I'll give it a rating of S to F. With an S-ranked take being one that I not only believe is hot, but also objectively correct, and an F-ranked take being one that I believe is not only not hot, but also is just incorrect. And we got a lot of takes to get into today. So with no further ado, let's get into ranking my fans' anime hot takes. But before we get to ranking anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you guys like the idea of me just spewing hot takes about anime and manga, go ahead and follow my anime podcast, Otaku's Anonymous, where me and Danny Mata break down everything that happened in anime and manga this week. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Before we get into all that, today we gotta talk about our favorite recurring sponsor to the page, Raid Shadow Legends. Listen, I've given you a million reasons prior to this moment to join up and download Raid. I mean, we've gone over the fact that there's 4 million users and 250 million worldwide downloads, 800 unique and awesome champions. But today we're gonna ignore even all that, because we're gonna talk about how if you download Raid today, you can get a massive head start with a free legendary hero in Sun Wukong and 2 epic heroes. Yes, that's right, you can get the free legendary champion Sun Wukong, and all you have to do is enter code Monkey King after downloading Raid today. But don't take too long, because this offer becomes unavailable after 72 hours have passed post your registration. See, for those of you who don't know Sun Wukong, he's a mythical creature from Chinese folklore, specifically the story Journey to the West. As the king of the monkeys, he's known for his superhuman abilities, his intelligence, and his trickery, and he is a force to be reckoned with in any team. He can steal buffs from enemies before attacking them. His Staff of Wonder ignores 50% of an enemy's armor, and he has a powerful passive that allows him to revive fully. On top of that, if you use my link to download Raid today, you'll get 2 free epic champions, Tayrell and Rector Draft. And if that's not enough for you, Raid is also doing a summer event right now that allows for new users to play a minigame that gives them a chance at winning a gaming console, a smartphone, or $5,000 in total Amazon gift cards. So what are you guys waiting for? There's never been a better time to join Raid than right now. Use the link in my description or scan the QR code on screen right now to get 2 free epic champions champions Tayrael and Rector Drath when you hit level 25. And after you download Raid, find me in game using the username on screen right now and join my clan, which you can find on screen right now. And together, we'll be able to raid our ways. So, like I said, we had 793 comments in response to our anime hot take garnering post. And while we've already done a video like this for my other channel, NCHammer23, on that post all I asked for was Naruto and Boruto hot takes. But as this page covers all anime and manga, I just asked for anime hot takes in general. And boy oh boy, are some of these takes general, including the #1 comment on this post, which was given by Sergio Ordonez 6769, whose comment says, a story being complicated doesn't instantly make that story good, and a story being formulaic and simple doesn't automatically make a story bad. Now, I believe this hot take is filled with objective half-truths. Like, this take is halfway to being correct, but also halfway incorrect. See, because the idea behind the take itself is objectively correct. A story being complicated doesn't make it good. A story being simple doesn't make it bad. That's bang on correct, a great take. And ironically, even though that just sounds like the objective truth, in the anime community, it doesn't seem to be. And that's where this take gets more interesting to me, because we have to take the context of what this take is actually talking about into play here. Now, this is me making an assumption, but basically what I believe this take is talking about is that stories like Jujutsu Kaisen or Hunter x Hunter, which are known as more complicated shonen stories, aren't good just because of their complication. However, some people, when they see a sprawling power system and a massive world that needs to be explored and a bunch of rules that allow for this power system to be augmented in specific and unique ways, get excited about the possibilities of that lore and ignore a lot of the holes and problems with the manga or anime that they are watching. That is to say, the TLDR of what I just said is, some people see the complication of more complicated manga like JJK and Hunter x Hunter and assume just because there's a bunch of rules that inherently that's better writing. While on the other side of the argument, some people see a manga like Kagurabachi or Demon Slayer, two very straightforward stories about a boy on a revenge path using magical katanas to try and cut down the bad guys of the world. And some people look at those stories and how simple they are and say that they're inherently worse because there's no complexity. And here's the thing, within the context of those 4 pieces of IP, that is the correct take. Kagurabachi and Demon Slayer are not bad because they're simple, and JJK and Hunter x Hunter are not good because they're complicated. In fact, some of the worst things about JJK and Hunter x Hunter is the complications. See, while Hunter x Hunter is much better at bookkeeping and auditing itself to make sure that there isn't massive plot holes that exist based off future actions that are counteracting something that was established 200 chapters ago, JJK has kind of been poking a couple holes in itself recently. And that's kind of system the fact of Gege not being as good as remembering everything he's written down as Togashi. All of this is to say that the things that make JJK and Hunter x Hunter good aren't the complications, but complications is too broad a word. See, yes, writing a story so complex that it's actually stupid doesn't constitute good writing. But where we're using the word complicated here, we should be using a series of different, more descriptive words. See, JJK has a vast, unique, and nuanced power system that does objectively have a lot of rules, some of which that are currently possibly being broken. And the complexity of that power system, well, it doesn't necessarily make the manga better because of its complexity, lends to more unique scenarios in the manga that can possibly be more compelling to individuals reading it. See, because when you have complexity in a story, there's more layers to it. And the deeper, more complex, and fleshed out a universe is, the more an individual can relate to that IP, as they can find pieces of themselves in that story. But this doesn't mean that you can't find complexity in what people would identify as a simple story. See, well, yes, objectively, Demon Slayer and Kagurabachi are much simpler stories than Hunter x Hunter and JJK. That's just from a plot perspective. Hey, Tanjiro's got to kill these series of demons in order to protect his sister because she's all he has left in the world. Cool. The bottom line of Demon Slayer is very simple, very easily understood, and easily digestible. However, the reason that Demon Slayer is one of the biggest anime on Earth right now is because of the complexity built out with the characters. See, because while the boat taking all the characters to the end of the story is going in a relatively straight line, the characters on that boat make the journey more interesting and more individualistic. And the same could be said for Kagurabachi, which is widely hailed as being too simple and too formulaic to be enjoyable. Though when you read it, you'll realize, oh, a lot of the characters are really fun, the art style is incredible, the powers are really cool, and so on and so forth. So while Kagurabachi is also heading on a straight line to its destination, it's about the stories you tell while on that journey. But this is only in the circumstance of two of the most popular manga IP on Earth right now. Because here's the thing, simple can be boring. I personally don't really watch Isekai anymore because I feel as though every Isekai is a hollow copy of other Isekai I've already watched, and I enjoyed those ones. I don't need to rewatch them. Neat gets reincarnated into some kind of green fantasy world where he's the strongest thing that's ever existed, but everybody hates him for some reason until he saves the world. Now everybody loves him, he's got a harem, and they live on happily ever after. It's boring, it's simple, and it's formulaic. And that's the danger with using these words that can mean so many things, because formulaic and simple is inherently boring. So aspects of incredibly popular IP like Demon Slayer and Kagurabachi are what some would identify as simple or formulaic. The reason that Kagurabachi and Demon Slayer are successful when so many of these other boy gets a katana and tries to fight the world stories aren't is because Kagurabachi and Demon Slayer actively differentiate themselves from those masses by not being simple or formulaic, just outside of the confines of the core plot. But at the end of the day, I get what this is saying. Complication doesn't mean good, simple doesn't mean bad. And I agree with that sentiment, though I don't necessarily believe it's as hot a take as people think it is. So we're gonna go with B tier. Up next, we have another entry from Sergio Ordonez, going 2 for 2 at the top comments of this post, as he goes on to say that 90% of the time when people say bad writing, all they mean is that they didn't like it, but can't figure out why. Now this is a hot take, and it's also not necessarily one I agree with, but there's also absolutely a kernel of me that does, in fact, agree with this. Because while yes, there's absolutely people who will pick up JJK, get confused, and say, it's poorly written and put it down, and while those people are objectively wrong because JJK is very well written, they're also kind of right. See, one of the biggest complaints that I have about JJK is that it makes the information in its manga borderline inaccessible to the casual reader. And do you want to know how I can prove that? I exist. That is to say that I and many other pages like me exist to break down complicated and complex manga for your average casual reader. Now, I'm not sitting here and coming at anybody's reading comprehension. If there's a complicated chapter of JJK, Hunter x Hunter, even a complicated chapter of Boruto, sometimes I'll have to reread it a couple of times to truly figure out what's going on. And considering the fact that manga is supposed to be consumed casually, the fact that there is some manga out there that people feel as though they have to put an active effort into to understand means that there's an aspect of that manga that's poorly written. I take incredible pride in my reading comprehension and my ability to break down what's happening in certain manga and anime to help the casual enjoyer understand and enjoy. It's basically what this entire page was built on. And thus, if somebody is to hypothetically pick up a manga and not understand it because of how it's written, inherently, that does lend itself to that manga being slightly poorly written. Gege's bad at explaining things, but he's incredible at foreshadowing and plot twists and character development. But the thing with this take is that somebody saying that a manga has bad writing could really boil down to one of two reasons. Either the manga is actually poorly written, or yes, they just didn't understand it and they don't know why. But I don't think people not understanding what they dislike about an IP and therefore just going for the bad writing route exists at a 90% clip. I'm gonna come out and say it right now. Go-Go Loser Ranger, at least the anime adaptation, is poorly written. Things are hardly explained, the universe seems messy, the characters' motivations are all over the place. It is, just objectively in my opinion, poorly written. And just right there, I orated why I believe it's poorly written. I feel as though this new season of Slime Isekai is poorly written. I love exposition dumps and world building as much as the next person, but I'm kind of a show don't tell person. If I wanted to watch a long-winded conversation, I'd read the light novels, not watch the anime. Now it's less being poor written and more being poorly drawn, but obviously the context of that is that the author would need to write characters into certain situations and have them enact ways in which these real-life political political repercussions are happening around the globe instead of giving us a 20-minute tableside conversation. And a fantastic example of good writing in this circumstance is the Tengen and Gyotaro fight in Demon Slayer's Entertainment District arc, where Tengen, after finally figuring out Gyotaro's musical score, tells us he's figured it out and then displays to us physically how the technique works. Because the reading and watching comprehension of most people engaging with Demon Slayer would be able to suss out how this technique works simply by watching it instead of being told. That's good writing. But I definitely do agree that there's a lot of people out there who will throw out the idea that a manga or an anime is poorly written as an excuse to not explain what they dislike about the anime or the manga. So we'll say this one is C tier. And apparently we're done with Sergio's run of supremacy here, because coming up third, we have, I'm assuming this is under, UND6er. I'm going with under, who says, I can't take any isekai enjoyer seriously, no matter how much they try to convince me that I Was Reborn as a Fleshlight is peak. Now, I Was Reborn as a Fleshlight doesn't actually exist, but you could imagine that it would. And I tend to agree with under here, but at the same time, I don't necessarily fully agree. But this definitely is a hot take. Isekai is one of the most popular genres in anime and manga today. And I'm aware I keep saying that I half agree, half disagree with all these takes, but that's because for the first three, that's the situation. Okay, let's break down what's wrong with isekai today, while also breaking down why it's completely fine to be an isekai enjoyer in 2024. The problem with isekai as a genre is ironically isekai enjoyers.
What do you mean, Nick?
Well, here's the thing. There is incredibly inventive isekai that come out every single year. But isekai that decide to go a different route than, oh, this guy was a complete and total shut-in that yelled at his mother and fondled every woman he ever met, but then he got hit by a car and now he's a superhero that has a harem, don't get picked up with the same amount of love as the isekai that go that route. Like, for example, one of my favorite isekai in the last decade, Campfire Cooking in Another World with My Absurd Skill, it didn't get nearly as much love as what I believe to be is a less inventive, more boring, and more formulaic isekai in the form of Tsukimichi Moonlit Fantasy, which is currently coming out. That's because Tsukimichi Moonlit Fantasy is just an isekai, which did begin with a somewhat unique summoning sequence of the MC, but slowly but surely the MC has devolved into just your standard isekai MC copy and paste. To further my point, the literal best isekai, outside of Konosuba, in the last decade is Sunny Boy, which plays out like a trippy version of Peter Pan. It's unpredictable, ambitious, and while it doesn't necessarily land in the best place, it's willing to break out of the isekai tropes that keep so many other isekai IP in a tiny little box. Now, Saga of Tanya the Evil and ReZero are good breakout moments of the isekai genre that break away from your standard trope of the MC being this all-powerful, god-eating, woman-collecting monster. And those are a breath of fresh air, but those only happen ever so often. By and large, your average isekai fan is looking for things like Overlord, Mushoku Tensei, SAO, or more recently than not, The Eminence in Shadow. And when you talk to the people that enjoy these baseline isekai, they're gonna give you lines like, oh, in The Eminence in Shadow, the MC has a harem of 12 girls, but he doesn't want the harem of 12 girls. He just wants to be able to survive a nuclear explosion, which I guess is fine. I'm never gonna fault anybody for enjoying that, but it's not that creative. And thus, in essence, if you've seen one of these baseline isekai, you've kind of seen them all. Not to mention the perpetual issue that happens with all isekai, that usually it's a man in his 20s or 30s reincarnating as a 14-ish-year-old boy, now surrounded by 14-ish-year-old girls that are part of his harem. Looking directly, so directly at you, Mushoku Tensei. And thus, if that makes you feel icky, it probably should, then yeah, it's gonna be hard to enjoy isekai. But here's the thing. There's a lot of really good aspects of even the worst isekai. Isekai, after all, was my favorite genre for the majority of my years as a weeb. And thus the idea of not being able to take somebody serious because they enjoy a genre of anime, I just can't get behind. Yes, does the isekai genre probably lend itself more than any other genre of anime to the more controversial aspects of anime? 100% yes. But if you want to talk to me about season 1 of SAO, the entirety of Konosuba, I love it so goddamn much, the first 2 seasons of The Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime, or the first 2 seasons of Log Horizon, yeah, I'm gonna be right there with you. So because I believe that isekai enjoyers probably get too much hate because of the very loud minority of them that scream about how Rudy having a harem of underage girls is actually super chill if you get to know him as a character, and because I believe anime fans should be allowed to enjoy whatever it is they want to enjoy, you know, so long as it isn't actively actively promoting pedophilia, I'm gonna put this take in D tier. But let's move on to something that's not Isekai, because whenever I talk about Isekai, the comments get real angry. To a comment left by Res557 that says, Hunter x Hunter could have been bigger than One Piece if it didn't have all those big hiatuses. And here's the thing. This is, in fact, a hot take. And it is one that I agree with more than any of the previous hot takes. See, coming out and never saying that something could compare to One Piece is a hot take, because it's gonna get you yelled at. So let me break down exactly why I do agree with this hot take. See, for those of you who don't know, Hunter x Hunter began its manga serialization in 1998, which is objectively 6 months after One Piece, as One Piece's first chapter came out July 22nd, 1997. Now, this means that if Togashi had released with the same regularity as Oda for Hunter x Hunter, there is a possibility if Hunter x Hunter's story was still continuing, it would be as long as One Piece. So within the capacity that Hunter x Hunter has the ability to be as long as One Piece without the hiatuses, I agree with this hot take wholeheartedly. But Nick, that seems like a super political answer. Why are you skirting around something? Well, that's because Hunter x Hunter, as it currently stands, is only 400 chapters long, while One Piece is closing in on 1,200. That's not actually true. It's only on chapter 1,115. Light work. But this means that One Piece is now 2.5-ish times larger than Hunter x Hunter. Closer to 3 times longer than Hunter x Hunter, which is insane. Now, do I believe that if Togashi was fully healthy that we would get 300 to 400 chapters of Dark Continent exploration? Yes. Absolutely, I do. I believe that if Togashi was fully healthy for the entirety of his writing of Hunter x Hunter, that where we currently are in the manga is about the halfway point for the story. As the Dark Continent has yet to be explored, Dawn Freaks has yet to be discovered, and oh yeah, the Succession Contest arc isn't even over yet. I believe if we spend anything less than the amount of chapters we've already spent on the V6 countries on the Dark Continent, that would be a crime against Hunter x Hunter. Because it's important to note here that the V6 countries, the entire Hunter x Hunter world as we knew it, exists in essentially what can be compared to Lake Superior in America. So if we don't get an equal amount of time exploring what is now objectively the rest of the actual world outside of a lake than we did exploring the world inside said lake, then that's a grave injustice to what Hunter x Hunter was building towards. Let me tell you right now, Togashi does not have 400 chapters left in him. The man is 58 years old. This manga started 25 years ago. But without all of these hiatuses, could Hunter x Hunter have been as great as One Piece? Honestly, yes. But also at the same time, probably no. See, here's the thing. One Piece is kind of a simple story. I know this is the real hot take built in here, but One Piece is just about defeating a series of bad guys. You gotta defeat the 7 warlords, and then the 4 emperors, and then CP0, and then the 5 elders, and then the king whose name I'm forgetting. Emu? And then you get to Laugh Tale, and then you're the king of the pirates. Now, I'm not saying that One Piece is a simple story. It has some of the greatest world building, character development arcs, and just cast in the history of anime and manga. And that world building and character development is what makes the story complex. But where One Piece prevails over Hunter x Hunter as a possible 1,000 chapter manga is the continuity of a key theme, and the continuity of One Piece's key theme is that the government is bad. That is what keeps the story put together. Hunter x Hunter doesn't really have one of those. I see, if you were to identify a key theme to Hunter x Hunter, it would just be exploration is good. See, because here's the thing. If we are truly identifying where the anime ends, which is about chapter 323 in the manga, as the half-ish point, the MC switches from Gon to Kurapika, which is incredibly indicative of the lack of a key central theme running through the entirety of Hunter x Hunter. But that's not necessarily a problem, because all of the characters, especially the main cast of Leorio, Kurapika, Gon, and Killua, are all very compelling characters who could be the MC of the story because they're just that interesting. The lack of consistency in terms of tone and theme makes it a bit harder to say, oh, Hunter x Hunter could be this 1,000-chapter journey. Now, I do genuinely believe if you gave Togashi a healthy body and allowed him to fully explore the Dark Continent, his world building would be better than that of One Piece's. But to say that it would be bigger than One Piece is kind of a stretch, because One Piece is a more accessible, I know that sounds crazy, story than a 900-chapter version of Hunter x Hunter. Simple, sells. And One Piece, while complex for all of you One Piece fans, is objectively kind of simple. And listen, Hunter x Hunter's only 400 chapters in, and half of you probably haven't read the manga because you've heard about how many walls of text there is. So I would sit on the take and say that Hunter x Hunter is a better and bigger and grander story than One Piece if it was a full 800 chapters long. I don't think the majority of people would agree with that take. So we're gonna put this take either high B or low A. Let's go with low A because we don't have anything in A yet. We also don't have anything in F yet, which is where this next take comes in. I know I'm spoiling it, but here we go. Tired Second says the story being heavily criticized shouldn't automatically make the story bad, which is a hot take, but is just one I don't agree with. A story being heavily criticized means the story is probably bad. But within the confines of the anime space, I kind of see what Tired Second is saying here. Take, for example, MHA, which is heavily criticized because of its fandom. See, a lot of people will see MHA as an IP and then see its fandom and go, oh, I don't want to be a part of that, and now I feel worse about that IP because of who supports it. That level of criticism shouldn't even be acknowledged. If you haven't read and interacted with the IP that you're actively criticizing, your opinion is null and void. So while yes, if there's people out there hating on MHA because they dislike the fandom, then no, that criticism doesn't count. But if there's people out there who have interacted with a story and are actively criticizing that story, then that story's probably not good. And here's the thing, and I guess I'm starting to understand where Tired Second is coming from more and more here as I'm talking myself through this. Any manga or anime that you currently know and dislike because you believe it's not good and therefore you're criticizing it, probably actually isn't all that bad. Why, you ask? Because you know it. See, I vehemently dislike Mushoku Tensei, but I can acknowledge the fact that as an anime and a manga, it's pretty good if you ignore all the massive red flags. See, because I fully acknowledge the fact that Mushoku Tensei's story itself is not bad, but there's aspects of the story that are just a non-starter for me. So my critique of Mushoku Tensei doesn't necessarily mean that the story is bad, it just means the story makes me uncomfortable, and I believe that these tropes should no longer exist. Why am I going on this tangent about anime that we know? Well, because if a story is actually really bad and is therefore correctly criticized, then you don't know about it. Dozens of anime come out every single season, and the majority of them are very bad and heavily criticized, and that's why you don't know about them. So a manga and anime can definitely be criticized for the wrong reasons. Those critiques don't necessarily mean the story is bad. But if the story is bad, it's gonna be criticized. So this is a D tier take. Now, let's get into one of the most ancient and beloved conversations in the entirety of the anime community, the dub versus sub conversation. As MacApta has said, dubs are just as good as subs. Most Western anime fans can't speak Japanese and therefore can't tell if a Japanese voice actor is doing a good/bad job. Most of the time. They say it's just better because they have no real idea, when it's really just down to preference. Now, in the dub versus subs conversation, this is a hot take. The majority of people in the anime fandom prefer subs, but MacApta is saying that dubs are just as good as subs. And while I believe that sometimes MacApta is correct, sometimes MacApta is incorrect. But here's the beauty of the dubs versus subs conversation. Sometimes the dubs are better than the subs. Sometimes the subs are better than the dubs, and sometimes they're equal. Let's talk, for example, about Dragon Ball. Dragon Ball's dub is better than its sub. If you don't think that, I'm sorry, you're wrong. Goku's voice in Japanese doesn't match his body. Sean Schemmel does an incredible job, and who could ever complain about Chris Sabat? But JJK's dub is worse than its sub. Mahito's voice actor alone makes JJK's sub better than its dub. But on the other end of it, Gojo's voice actor is incredible. And while I didn't love Sukuna's voice actor in English initially, I've definitely grown to like it more. See, here's the beauty of the dubs versus subs conversation. Neither is better. Blind faith to either dubs or subs is just the wrong way to go about enjoying anime, because some anime are better in dub and some anime are better in sub. I'm watching Konosuba right now, and I'm watching it while I'm working out, so I'm watching it in English, but I can fully admit to you that Konosuba is funnier in Japanese. And ironically, it's funnier in Japanese for the exact reason that this comment called out. See, it's funnier in Japanese because I barely speak any Japanese, and thus the delivery of the lines, for some reason, tickles me a bit funnier. See, for those of you who watch Konosuba, you'll know that when people are talking about Kazuma, he'll often chip in by saying, "I'm Kazuma" in the background. For some reason, in these moments in Japanese, when Kazuma's going "Kazuma desu," as opposed to "I'm Kazuma" in English, It's just funnier to me in Japanese. And here's the thing, I speak a fairish amount of Japanese, so I understand a lot of what's being said. And still, to me, that sub is funnier. But because MechApta is saying that dubs are as good as subs, I'm gonna have to say that this is a B tier take, because MechApta isn't saying that dubs are better than subs or vice versa. They're saying that dubs are as good as subs, and while I believe it's more of a case-by-case basis, because we're looking at them as equal, I'm gonna have to agree with this take. But just because I agree with that, but don't get used to the idea of me agreeing with your takes. Because up next we have a take that I've seen permeating across the internet in the last couple of weeks, and it is a hot take because every time I see it, I get infuriated. See, this hot take is presented to us by Alessandro Nova 7761. Who says that Sukuna is the main character of Jujutsu Kaisen, and 99% of the gripes with the story are alleviated when viewing the story from that perspective. Here's the thing. The first chapter of JJK is literally called Ryumen Sukuna. And Sukuna is definitely Gege's favorite character, but he's not the main character of JJK. See, while yes, we can all have collective gripes that Yuji hasn't been in the story enough, Yuji has played a central role in what's now become known as Sukuna Kaisen, aka the last 50 chapters of JJK, because while 15 or so opponents have launched their body towards Sukuna, who is the only person who's gotten knocked down time and time again and is still standing. Yuta, kind of, but also Yuji. See, calling Sukuna the main character of JJK is not only lazy, but it's also kind of reductive. See, it doesn't do justice to Gege's writing style. See, here's the thing. The majority of anime and manga fans are used to anime and manga holding their hands. They're used to once-in-a-lifetime legendarily strong villains being taken out by apparently more once-in-a-lifetime legendarily strong good guys. Madara is whispered about for the entirety of Naruto as the most legendary shinobi in the history of people holding kunai. And yet Naruto and Sasuke, after getting a power from Hagoromo, are able to box on par with him even at his strongest. And this is because Naruto and Sasuke are both legendarily powerful reincarnations of the children of God. Yakuba is literally the god of the Bleach universe, as strong as anybody should ever be. But because Ichigo is a combination of a Quincy, a human, a Fullbringer, and a Soul Reaper, with also just like an insane amount of luck, eventually he figures out how to defeat Yakuba. And this story is as pervasive as the idea of anime and manga is. What Gege is doing is similar to what one is doing by writing One Punch Man. Gege is pulling the curtains on an age-old trope and making you look face to face with something that you've had in your anime and manga forever, but is now giving us a realistic ending to a story we all love. Sukuna is the strongest Jujutsu sorcerer of all time, and in the golden age of Jujutsu 1,000 years ago, it took the combined efforts of everybody to defeat him. Now, 1,000 years later, when the Jujutsu Society is much weaker than it was 1,000 years ago, things are not going as well. That makes sense. It tracks. So no, Sukuna is not the main character of JJK. He's just the first realistic representation of the biggest bad at the end of a popular story. See, because sometimes the biggest, most legendary bad isn't hitting his stride at the same time as the biggest, most legendary good. And if you make Sukuna the main character of the story, it doesn't alleviate the gripes revolving around JJK. Because if Sukuna was the main character of JJK and he was always supposed to win, the story would be incredibly boring. Imagine Sukuna was the MC of JJK. The story would be, I was an incredibly powerful sorcerer who the entire world teamed up against because I wanted to eat them, and then I got sealed for 1,000 years, and then slowly but surely I was consumed into another boy. I was switched into another boy after that, and now I'm slowly but surely killing the entirety of the Jujutsu Society again. There's no arc in any of it. He's not training, he's not necessarily getting more powerful outside of switching into bodies, and he's vowing his way out of every problem that comes his way. He's not compelling as an MC, though he is incredibly compelling as a villain. Yuji's arc is substantially better written and more interesting for an MC than Sukuna's. And trying to say that Sukuna is the MC of Jujutsu Kaisen is just lazy, and it misinterprets what Gege is trying to do. So no, it's an F tier take. And I got time for 2 more here, so I'm gonna do the 2 favorite that I've seen thus far in this comment scroll. The first of which is from one Tony Montana, who fortunately took some time away from being the world's biggest snow dealer to comment some anime hot takes for me. And Tony Montana's hot take, which is definitely a hot take, and one that I adore, is that Thorfinn is more inspirational than Luffy, which, if you say to the majority of anime fans, will get you screamed at, but is also an incredible take. See, ironically, both Thorfinn and Luffy's stories are that of perseverance, but their stories are about as different as they could possibly be. See, let's break down Luffy's story because inherently it's easier to break down. Luffy wants to become the freest person on Earth, and the freest person on Earth to him is the king of pirates. And thus Luffy has to make it to Laugh Tale to become the king of the pirates in order to find the One Piece, because not until you find Gold D. Rogers' treasures can you truly become the king of the pirates. Now, I'm aware that that is an incredibly reductive breakdown of what Luffy's story is. Don't yell at me. But we can all agree that's the core component of who Luffy is. And thus any perseverance that Luffy has to do is persevering through superfluous things that happen around this goal in order to achieve this goal. And how does Luffy do this? Well, he befriends the people that are nice to him and he beats the people that are mean to him. It's a simple story about rallying against what's wrong and trying to achieve your goals. Luffy is standing up against a fascist government while also trying to achieve the one thing he wants in life. It's inspiring, but not as inspiring as Thorfinn's story. See, Thorfinn's story is also a story of perseverance, but Thorfinn's story is a story about persevering in the face of calamity. See, Luffy is presented with obstacles. Thorfinn is presented with calamity. Thorfinn is born into a peaceful life from one of the most powerful men on the planet, but that peaceful life is snatched from Thorfinn, and thus he's thrown into a world of war by Askeladd. Now this leads Thorfinn down a dark path that ends with him killing dozens, if not hundreds of people, ghosts that haunt him to this day. And Thorfinn does all of this in the pursuit of finally one day achieving revenge against Askeladd, something he never gets. And if you were to impose this arc upon Luffy, this would be like if Luffy never found the One Piece and had to pivot to something else, because that's what Thorfinn has to do. In the face of not getting his revenge against Askeladd, Thorfinn has to pivot, and thus instead he pivots to the idea that he has no enemies and that he has to achieve the peaceful life his father wanted for him. But in order to do this, Thorfinn needs to stop things like slavery and war from existing. And thus in this manner, Thorfinn's goal is much more wide-reaching than Luffy's. And sure, you can say that Luffy will try to stop a war or slavery whenever he can, and you'd be 100% correct, but that is not a core component of who Luffy is. And thus, not only does Thorfinn not get what his prime directive is as a child, though Luffy is most likely going to get that, but he switches his goal to something much grander than what Luffy is aiming for, and genuinely I find that more inspiring and more impressive than Luffy's story. But that's because I'm an adult, and Thorfinn comes from a seinen manga while Luffy comes from a shonen manga. See, Luffy's story, while complex and beautiful, is meant for 14-year-old boys. It's easier to digest, while Thorfinn's story isn't really something you can understand and appreciate until you're older. So this is not only a hot take, but also a fantastic one at that, which is why it's getting our first S ranking. Since we're talking about One Piece, let's keep talking about One Piece with our last hot take, which is given to us by the Sam MG, who says One Piece's episode count is actually an unreasonably high barrier for entry. And my God, is he correct? So here's the thing. Ironically, this is a hot take. That sounds ridiculous, right? But slowly but surely, this is becoming less and less of a hot take, because the actual people who make One Piece and some of the biggest production companies on Earth have acknowledged that. How do I know they've acknowledged the fact that One Piece's high episode count is a massive barrier of entry for the IP? Well, because they're remaking One Piece. For those of you who don't remember, WIT and Netflix announced that they're going to be remaking One Piece in the form of the One Piece, a reanimation and repacing project to make One Piece match the pacing and animation of new gen anime. Because here's the thing. One Piece's anime shouldn't be longer than 600 episodes. If we assume that One Piece was adapted at 2 chapters an episode, it would currently be sitting in the region of 550-ish episodes. And that's if we're assuming it's adapted at 2 chapters an episode, which is actually kind of slow comparatively to your average new gen anime. So if the entirety of One Piece's manga was adapted in new gen pacing style, it would be 500 episodes or less. But One Piece's anime is almost 1100 episodes long, which is absurd. Not only because that's an insane amount of episodes, but because the pacing of the majority of those episodes is 0.85 chapters per episode, which is 12 pages of content for 22 minutes of runtime. That's not good. And as somebody who's watched 940 episodes of One Piece, I can tell you from a very informed standpoint, that's not good. But a lot of One Piece fans will tell you that they like the pacing because it makes them feel as though they're on the journey as well, which is Stockholm Syndrome. Straight up and down. It's literally the only logical explanation. In trying to tell somebody that they need to watch this show that's 1,100 episodes of some of the worst paced anime you've ever seen is a ridiculously high barrier of entry. And that is confirmed because they're throwing millions of dollars at remaking the IP. And yet, this is still a hot take, but it is one I agree with, so it's getting the second S rank. And just like that, that's all the time that I have for anime hot takes today, guys. But if you loved this video and you want to see me do more in the future, tell me in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And who knows, maybe if this video blows up and we do part 2, I'll get around to your anime take.